look at this thing we built. And I hope that that's what it feels like to everybody, that this is something that we built, because without everyone here, and a lot of people who aren't here right now, it wouldn't have become a reality. If you had asked me even a year ago to imagine what professional volleyball could look like in the United States, in my wildest dreams, I could not have described this, right? This quality of production, being on national TV, playing in over 100 countries, bringing some of the best players in the world to play on our home court, the outpouring of support from our fans. And there's no way I could have thought of being on a Topps card or a league that would donate to the causes that we care about, or Gloria Steinem wearing our t-shirt. And it makes me think about, too, the women who came before us.
Thanks so much for clicking play and joining me on this episode of She Got Next. My guest today is Cassidy Lichtman. She's the Vice President of Volleyball and Athlete Engagement with Athletes Unlimited, AU. Let's go. And I'm going to start with something that I think happened to you most recently, unless some other title was bestowed upon you in the last couple weeks. But I learned that you were just elected chair of USA Volleyball's board of directors, and you're the first athlete representative as chair. And is it okay if I read to you what the president and CEO said about you? I'm going to tell you a lot about yourself today. So you said her leadership will play a pivotal role in advancing our mission to inspire and empower athletes, strengthen our volleyball community, and support success and well-being at every level. That sounds like a lot of pressure to me, but I'm not a pro at this. But taking on this position, I wonder, where do you even start? What are some strategies or things that you know from your experience being in the league that you know you want to implement at this point?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, USA Volleyball's, these national governing bodies are such kind of huge machines that touch the entirety of the sport. And so it's got such a broad mandate, to grow the entire sport and to ensure that, every child that plays it has a, safe and fun experience and can develop their skills, all the way up through our Olympians. And so I think that that's at the core of everything, is how do we just center the well-being of the athlete, whether they're, picking up a ball at 8 years old or, trying to get on a podium. And so there's a lot of different layers to that. I think what we're doing at the youth level, it just gets more and more complicated every year with the big business of youth sports as it grows and all of the different kind of businesses and interests that come into that. So as, a nonprofit, and the governing body of the sport, it's really about looking at that and going, which aspects of this should be commercialized, which aspects of this should not be commercialized, how is that affecting, this child and their family as they go through their kind of sport experience, and is it keeping kids in sport longer or not? And so I think that's, one of the really big questions. And then the other one to me is, I really think volleyball should be a mainstream sport. And so, from that commercial lens, how do you gain visibility, at the pro level, at the Olympic level, all the way throughout? Because it is just a massive, massive sport that just doesn't get talked about enough.
Yeah, it's huge. I hate to put it this way. It's huge in Europe, which is, it's kind of like talking about soccer. It's huge all over the world, and we're just kind of catching up. But I do feel like volleyball, especially women's volleyball, is quickly becoming the next big women's sport that's really kind of jumping into our collective consciousness as women's sports fans here in the States. And as someone who's been playing the game forever, that has stayed in the volleyball world now after retirement, I wonder what you say to people who are just kind of opening their eyes and their hearts to this experience.
Yeah, I mean, welcome. It's about time. It's really secretly been a huge sport for a long time. The numbers have always been there. The youth side of it has been massive since I was a kid. We've been filling convention centers for a long time now, and so I think the visibility of as it's grown in college, and all of those college conferences have gotten their net, Pac-12 network, RIP, Big Ten network, all of those as those grew and ESPN's commitment grew. I think now it's gained visibility at that level. It's always been super popular, one of the most popular events at the Olympics. But then people forget about it, for 4 years and come back. So I just think, it's the intersection of the women's sports movement that's obviously, huge and growing and incredible, and the visibility that this sport has grown in the last, 5 to 10 years or so, they're kind of hitting each other at hopefully the right time. But, the numbers of participants and everything are, have been there and continue to grow and honestly outpace most other sports.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you talking about how it's been growing kind of in quiet, and I think that's the challenge for any sport, but especially the challenge over the last few decades with women's sports. If they're not put on television, if they're not advertised in the same way, if they don't have the brand partners, the visibility of it's really grassroots level. And if you're able to really nurture families and young athletes, they will continue to love the sport. But you do want to be able to have that access to people who would love the sport if they could just see it beyond the Olympics. And I think we're getting to that point.
Yeah, for sure. I think sports like, basketball and soccer, obviously, I think and tennis, I guess, are kind of leading in the women's sports space and doing some really amazing things. And I think in some ways they have the benefit of, having a really strong male counterpart that existed before, that really embedded the sport in the cultural ecosystem around us. So, if you grew up a basketball fan, like it's pretty easy to transition to like, oh yeah, I also like women's basketball. Volleyball doesn't, the men's side is smaller than the women's side. So it really has the potential to be the first, I think, mainstream sport led by women, which will be really cool. But it is an initial hurdle that we've had to clear that I think some of these other sports were just ahead of us on for that reason.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Now I want to go back in time just a few years. In 2021, you came out of retirement after having an incredible professional career. Again, career playing for USA Volleyball, having an incredible career at Stanford, playing professionally all over the world. I'm going to name some of the countries that you played in: China, France, Switzerland, Poland, Azerbaijan.
Yep.
I think I did it. I got it right the first time. I was practicing that. But you came out of retirement and became a founding member of Athletes Unlimited Pro Volleyball League. So you were playing and you were part of the Players Executive Committee, the PEC. And I wonder, thinking about all the experience you've had professionally, again, traveling the world, even retiring, and then coming back to this opportunity to play again and influence the way that this league runs, like what did you use or what did you learn from your experience as a pro that you then applied to joining that league?
Yeah, I mean, it was such an incredible opportunity, having had that experience overseas. I mean, I loved playing volleyball and I was super grateful for the opportunity to go and do that as a career and get paid for it and travel the world. It's also a tough life. I mean, there's a lot of places you don't get treated great. You're in another country, like you're super isolated. So, there's a lot of it that's hard. And when AU started, one of the kind of foundational pieces of it was this partnership with the athletes, and that's led through the player executive committee. And so being on the PEC and being in the room and having them say like, actually your experience is what we need. They're like, we can run a business, but we don't know the best way to make a volleyball league. So we're just going to ask you, which was just a revolutionary concept. But just ask the athletes. And it's been, I think that maybe there was a question in some people's mind if that would work in the beginning, and it's worked so beautifully because I think both sides really understand the value, the athletes get that the league needs to succeed in order for the athletes to have an opportunity, and the league understands that the athletes are their most valuable asset and they need to treat them right. And so I think all of the experience overseas and what we didn't like and what we did, we were able to bring into that room, and to see that kind of come into fruition and be realized, and especially that first season, but every season since, I think every time we have a new athlete, they're just blown away by that experience, and they're like, oh, this is what it could be like. Like I honestly want every athlete to be there and just be like, this is the bar. Like we can't set it down here anymore. Like we got to set it up there.
Well, let me go back, because in 2022, which is after your first season at AU, there was an article written about you in Just Women's Sports, and this is what you were quoted as saying: "It is incredibly genuine, and all of the decisions really are run by the five of us," meaning the Players Executive Committee. What are particular decisions that you guys are making collectively, or were you making collectively at that time, that made people, as you said, new athletes coming in saying, oh, this is the bar, this is where this is how it should work, how it should function? What were some of the things that you guys put in place for people to feel that way? Yeah,
I mean, it's all of it. It's, down to, where our locations, where we're playing each year, what the venues look like, the design of the uniforms. One big thing our first year was like, do you want to wear spandex or leggings? It's like such a small question, but such a huge question.
Yeah.
And we were like, listen, our athletes, some of them want to wear that and some of them want to wear this. And they were like, all right, we'll just make both and you can choose. And it was just like, we can do that. We can just like have what we want. So there's all, what when do you want to eat pregame meal? Do you want to have a postgame meal instead? Like the question is just, you're never asked. And then it's a continuous conversation. And so it's not just like one time, but as we go, it's like, hey, is this working? Is it not? Should we change something? And I think it's just the openness of literally everyone in the organization that, when the athletes say, this is what we want, the initial response to that is, okay, how can we make that work? And we might come back and say, we can't make that work, but can we try this? And we'll get to a kind of a middle point. But as an athlete, like that's so refreshing just to be like, oh, I've been heard. I understand why or why not. And then we can move forward kind of together when everybody's on the same page.
I think that's the dream of life, right? Wherever you work is, I want to be heard. I want to be able to adapt to what is working and not working. If we can all succeed together, if we're really listening and wanting to position ourselves to be successful. Like
it's so simple.
Mind-blowing.
It's so simple. It's just like, I don't know, be respectful, like disagree respectfully. It's amazing.
Well, let me go back because I kind of started this conversation without kind of laying the foundation of what Athletes Unlimited is. It's a public benefit corporation, and legally it's structured. So I'm going to read this and you let me know if I'm saying this in a weird way. It's to balance profit making with specific positive social or environmental impact. Your mission, in part, it reads this: we aim to empower athletes as leaders, promote inclusive ownership focused on long-term financial and personal well-being. And I want to focus on that last part, the financial and personal well-being, because I think a lot of times in professional leagues, it's about what you're doing on the court, on the field, in the pool, on the ice, whatever the sport is, for however long you're with that team or that league. And then it's like, good luck with life after.
Totally.
And having this as part of your mission, financial well-being, mental well-being, emotional well-being, I think it's a big deal to say, like, this is part of our value statement, our mission statement. And I'm wondering, like, I feel like we're in the golden era of athletes being able to promote themselves as individuals, find brand partners, but that's for, stars. Mm-hmm. That's for the faces of an organization. But for the other 99%, sometimes they're left on their own to think about where they can be financially and what to do with themselves after retirement. Yep. And retirement can mean you're 30. It might mean you're 25, and to have to kind of adjust to that, again, you likely need a lot of support. And that was a 4-hour question, Cassidy, but I wonder like what AU is doing specifically to kind of position their athletes to be financially stable or educated, and then also take care of that mental health as they prepare for life in the league and then beyond.
Yeah, great. I think on the mental health piece, we have a partnership with honoree. They work with a lot of sports leagues, so that's available to our athletes. I think year round now, which is awesome. And then on the sort of education side, we have a pretty robust kind of program around the athletes, and we're always trying to do more. But just really trying to check in with them on what they need. And a lot of it is like, okay, I've just retired. Where do I start? Or like, what skills could I maybe build? And so, for example, there's a program on AI that we're currently sourcing athletes for. If they want to learn some like basic AI skills, we send some to Harvard Business School to do a course. We have a partnership through EY. We put people through their cohort program that could then potentially lead to jobs afterwards. So really trying to find those opportunities where they can get real skills and try some different things. And so we're always working on kind of how we can do more of that, how we can find more career coaching for them, because that is a big part of it. And then on the kind of financial well-being side, I mean, other than offering them some educational opportunities around finances, the biggest and coolest thing to me that they put in place from the beginning at AU is our profit participation program, which is it's essentially that the athletes get a share in the company. They share in the long-term value that's being created. So every time you play a game, you get units within this pool. And as this public benefit corporation, we're able to not only maximize profits for shareholders, but for this mission. So all of our investors cap their returns. So they might cap it at 6, 8, 10, 12%, whatever it is. Anything beyond that's going to go into a pool. Half of that goes to the mission, half of it goes to the athletes. And we'll share in that for the next 20 years after we're done playing. So the point of it was, I mean, our founders, John Patrick and Jonathan Soros, like the greatest men, like I'm on their team for life. But, you know, Jonathan talks about like the Billie Jean King problem, right? Where she started playing for $1. And then Serena Williams, how many years later, you know, makes $1 million, but like those women who started for that $1 don't get to share in that. And so how can you take these athletes who are there in the beginning and say, like, you've created this thing. Now, as it blows up and hopefully gets huge and it's worth, you know, 10, 15, 1,000 times what it was when you joined, then you're going to benefit from that. And it's not only going to, you know, team owners and all of the people who normally benefit from it.
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, it's such a unique opportunity for athletes and for fans to back athletes who are in a position to benefit from the team, from the league, and their success. Like, you're invested emotionally and financially in their long-term success. And I think obviously other leagues run in different ways. And those mothers of leagues, mothers of teams that kind of, like you said, laid the foundation, oftentimes they're left out. And what they're given instead is a new podcast to talk about what it was like 30, 40 years ago. We all have a podcast these days, and that's awesome. But I think everyone would probably choose some kind of financial foundation on which they can build. And I think that it's incredible what Athletes Unlimited is doing. But I want to go back in time to 2015. And this is what really made me want to connect with you, because you published an article in the Players Tribune called Pain and Gain.
Yes.
And what you wrote in that article, and I'm going to put a link to it, was just amazing to me. And I could feel a lot. I felt a lot reading it. And I want to share a couple of quotes here. You started off by saying this: to see me on the court as an outside hitter with the USA national team, you'd never detect anything out of the ordinary. The truth, though, is that I've been in pain every day of my life for over 16 years. Now, this is almost 11 years ago that you wrote that article. And you go on to describe the chronic pain that you were enduring that began at age 9, and how that chronic pain has stayed with you throughout your professional journey. And it kept you kept playing volleyball anyway. And a quote, I'm going to add this to it. This is a long introduction to a question here. But another article on Just Women Sports, you said, volleyball is written in my soul. I'm never going to just walk away from the sport or from the sports world. So I wonder, like, what is it about volleyball itself, that sport, that just hooked you and kept you playing beyond decades of chronic pain?
Yeah. I mean, I think I was hooked basically from birth. I mean, my mom's a volleyball coach. Like, some of my first memories are in a volleyball gym, you know, when she was at practice, and she was like, here's a ball. You and your brother need to go entertain yourselves for a couple hours. and I loved it. And, you know, I was just waiting for the time that I got to be on my first team. And, you know, I was 9 years old when that happened. I couldn't walk for a long time. And so it was like shortly after I started walking that I, you know, went to my first kind of tryout and made a team. But I just I knew I was going to play. And so I was just kind of waiting for my turn to get on the court. And I think it's so much about the game that I love. I mean, obviously kind of the team nature of it. And, you know, I think in some ways it's the quintessential team sport, because you don't get to decide where the ball goes. You know, if you're playing basketball, you can kind of not pass it to somebody on the court, but like the other team's hitting it. And if you've got a weak link, then that's going to get exposed. And so I think that's part of it. You know, the physicality of the game and just kind of how it flows and moves, I think is like really beautiful. And yeah, it's just fun, but it does feel like something that, you know, I was genuinely like born to do and knew that kind of my whole life. And in relation to kind of the pain, it was like, it made it worse and it made it better. Like, it's certainly made it a lot worse. Like, there's no question that was a real struggle through my whole career. But having something that I loved that much, I kind of, I maybe I mentioned this in the article, but like, I kind of fenced that off as like, you can't take this from me. Like there's so many, when you have a disability or illness like this, like there's so many different pieces of life that it affects, like there's probably 100 different things I do every day that, how I put my socks on, like that I don't even really think about anymore. But volleyball was this thing where I was like, I love this and it's mine, and you can't have it. And I had to really ask myself at different parts of my career as the pain got worse, like, does that still make sense? Like, is that still the right decision? And every time the answer was yes. And I wanted to keep going with it. And I'm glad I did. Like, I loved every part of my career, even when it hurt a lot.
It's interesting. You bring up a point that I didn't think about when I didn't think about how athletes, even on the collegiate level, or maybe even younger, if they suffer an injury, you kind of learn how to play through the pain. You can manage it while the clock is going and the ball's in the air, what have you. You can take your mind off of it and play through it. But it's the everyday things. You talked about having to think about which route you're going to take on Stanford's campus to avoid stairs. Yeah. How am I going to get to class? What ramps are available? How am I going to sit? And every little calculation you have to make. But on the court, that is the time where, like you said, like you could protect that was yours. And I think, again, that article really helps kind of peel back the layers of the realities that I think a lot of athletes likely have to endure while either playing or afterwards. Again, a lot of times you're retiring and you're 30 or 40 years old, and it's all of a sudden those knees, those elbows, that back pain, all of those things come back and remind you of every play, every game, every dive that you made. But what I also love about that article is you didn't just end it with like, oh, well, I'm still doing this. Like, you give advice to people who may not have friends, family, a community to talk to about pain that's difficult to describe. That's always there. That might go undiagnosed and people doubt you. But instead of allowing that to overwhelm you, you gave them 3 things to think about. Again, I'm going to read to you your own writing, Cassidy.
Great.
Try not to worry about winning the war and focus on winning the battle. These things are, in my mind, are beyond just thinking about people who are dealing with chronic pain. This is like life advice right here. Number 2, throw out your concept of impossible. And number 3, you can choose to be angry over the one hardship or to be grateful for the abundance of the gifts in your life. You can choose what defines you. Again, this article was 11 years old. I don't know how often you go back and read your own advice, Cassidy. I'm going through that some myself. But thinking of those 3 things, try not to worry about winning the war, but winning the battle. Throw out the concept of impossible and choosing what defines you. Are those things still showing up for you?
Yeah, it's funny. As you read those, if you had asked me to name them, I maybe could have guessed, but like would not have remembered what they were. But as you were reading them, I was like, I feel like those define my life, right now. And I think they've fully stayed true. And yeah, or like so much of why kind of I am who I am and where I am.
I did include this in the prep. I hope it's okay that I bring it up though. But after a competitive nomination process, you were named one of Wasserman's Collective Impact 25 members of this collective impact organization. And on the website, it says that this group has come together at this pivotal moment for gender equity and visibility in the sports industry. And again, you've been in the sport of volleyball and the industry for many decades now. What makes this season feel different to you, potentially?
I think it's the moment we're in, both in sport and kind of society. Like obviously the recognition of women's sport and the momentum behind that the last couple of years has really just changed the game in a lot of ways. And as somebody who works in women's sports, that makes me more optimistic than I probably would have been in the past. And this cohort is women across sports, but I think some of that translates into, the men's sports side too. I think it's why women's sport is so important in a societal context, is like the more visible that is and the more accepted it is as kind of an equal partner to the men's side, the more women are seen like that everywhere in society. So I think that's a lot of it. And just, I think women in general, it's like, we're tired of this. Let's do better.
I feel like we're at a time right now where sports is really the last place where people are being very demonstrative about their values. They're not allowing conversations to be siloed. They're not saying sit or saying yes to sitting out. They're still having people really dive into DEI. They're having LGBT night. They're having Latinos Heritage Night. They're talking about gender identity and equity in sports because so many different types of people play the game and so many different types of people are in the stands and are buying the products and are wearing the jerseys, that sports is a place where it's like, we're going to celebrate this stuff. And we're not going to allow people, again, to kind of talk us out of it or talk us out of believing that this is not important, that it can't move society forward. In my mind, I don't know, I'm preaching to you right now, Cassidy, but I'm just like, this is what I think is so important. And I'm like, it's what's really driven me to want to continue to have these conversations, because you, again, are part of this cohort that is revolutionizing the industry and that you've been on both sides. You're a leader, you're helping make change, but you've also played the game. And from where you began as a little girl who found volleyball to where it is now, it has to feel like the energy is shifting a bit. The momentum is building.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, first of all, like that cohort's so cool and so great to be a part of. Like, I didn't know going into it what it would look like, but I think just having all of those women kind of on your side, having allies across the whole industry has been really rewarding. And yeah, I mean, I grew up really believing like we couldn't have professional volleyball in the US. Like that was just kind of the conventional wisdom. And I was like, okay, like that's too bad. But, and really believed it through. I mean, even after going overseas, even after playing in front of big crowds in a place like China or Poland or somewhere, even after seeing it on the Olympics, knowing that people loved it, it was like, okay, but for whatever, like it just doesn't work in the US. And then, when AU started, I was like, oh, if people invest in it for real, maybe we can have it. And now it's, it's blowing up and there's multiple leagues. And so, yeah, I mean, to see it come to this point from where it was, I think we've just lifted the veil of like that assumption that, again, that you just having grown up with everybody telling you like, yeah, sorry, like this is just how it is. And then as soon as you lift that veil and you're like, wait, no, it isn't. Like that
doesn't have to be.
That's ridiculous. If you stick us in a high school gym on a, terrible feed and put it behind a paywall on some like far off corner of the internet, like correct, it will not work. But if you give us a shot, like there's no reason why we can't be just as big as the men.
I like to ask my guests the same 4 questions in the last 5 minutes. And I'm going to do my best not to interject because I'm like, this is your time to not have me give like soliloquies in the middle of a question.
Okay.
But I know you've played volleyball essentially your whole life, but do you remember, and maybe it's the gym answer, your first sports memory? Maybe it wasn't even volleyball, but just getting on some team, watching a game, going to a live sporting event, but one that kind of sticks out in your mind as a first or close to a first?
Yeah. I mean, my first sports memory, I don't know exactly which one it was. Either in the gym with my mom or probably my dad teaching me how to throw a ball. I played I have an older brother, so he played Little League, so I was going to play Little League with the boys. And so my dad teaching me how to throw a baseball. Like those are probably my first sports memories. My first like full understanding of like a real female athlete that I remember, other than like the girls on my mom's teams, but like a big time athlete was Mia Hamm in the commercial with Michael Jordan.
Yes.
Anything you can do, I can do better. I was like, oh, yeah, like that's cool.
Yeah. Another member of the cohort, the Wasserman cohort, Maria, she works for the sneakers app, Nike sneakers app. And she talked specifically about that commercial being like, oh my gosh, I can do those things. I can play with them. And I'm like, it's so incredible what commercials, what athlete, like those things that stick with you and just change your perception, and why it's so important to have those things, because it does really change millions of lives. What about a sports movie that you love, that you watch a lot, that you quote potentially?
Oh,
One that
God.
you remember that I know there's a million of them out there. I can tell you some of the hits, or I can sit in silence and let you think about what movie you want to answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think, A League of Their Own is great. The Sandlot, probably, like, classic. Mighty Ducks. Like, I think the classics.
Yes. The Sandlot is one I'm quoting on the daily. Sometimes when people don't
So
know what
good.
I'm talking about, I'm like, "Ugh, we're so different. How do you not know? Benny was adorable. Anyways, okay. I also want to provide you with an opportunity to shout out a person or a couple of people who has helped you, or who have helped you, I should say, through your professional journey or even your personal journey. Just shout out a couple of folks who are like, they saw you, they encouraged you, they helped you see a future for yourself that maybe you didn't know was possible.
Yeah, good question. I think my club coach when I was young probably was a big one, Kara Haynes. Just in terms of like really treating me like I should have an opinion on what was going on the court, and she had gone off and played in college and played at the national team, and so knowing a woman who had kind of done that, I think, was super impactful. I think coming out, like, really, like I said, our founders, John and Jonathan, and our COO, Anna, the three of them, I think, like, the experience of being on the PEC was just really life-changing, and in terms of just being in a room with that kind of person and having them look at you and listen to you like your opinion matters, just like built so much confidence in me of like, yeah, like why shouldn't I be able to just speak and give my perspective, and that should always carry value. So I think that's been super impactful, and they're just great mentors in a lot of different ways. It's a different thing to go from, I mean, okay, we'll listen to you in terms of like where to stand on the court, to, hey, we're running a business and we care about your opinion.
Yeah.
And that was never the case at any point when I was an athlete, playing professionally overseas. Like, they weren't like, hey, what should we do with marketing? Like,
I love it. So the last question I typically ask is, how are you making space for the next generation of women in the industry? And that's essentially your career, what you're doing now. But I just want to leave that question there in case there are any other things that you do specifically that you want to call out, that you want to make sure that volleyball is thriving, that women are in the industry at whatever level, what particular things you might be doing.
Yeah, I think all of that, you're right. It's like, that is kind of both my like day job and, this board job on this board chair job on USA. But I think one of the things is that exact experience that I had with John and Jonathan and Anna, and them, teaching me about my voice. I think passing that to all of the women that I work with is super important. And so that's where I'm always at with our athletes, is like, not only do I want you to come in here and have a good time and play volleyball, but I'm going to keep telling you, like say what you think and don't apologize for it. Mm-hmm. Like we talk about that a lot when we like have talks in our season of like, we're not going to apologize for how we feel. We're not going to diminish how we feel. Just like say it and own it. And so I think that if my legacy is like putting out a horde of women in the world who, know that their opinion has value, then like I'll feel successful.
Wow. Well, I'm feeling successful having had this conversation with you. What you've done and what you're continuing to build with Athletes Unlimited is huge. And I'm grateful that you all exist. And I'm glad they're hearing your voice and you're creating space for other voices to be heard. So thanks so much, Cassidy.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for doing this and covering women in sports.
And thank you again for watching this on YouTube, listening on Spotify, following along on Instagram and Blue Sky. Until next time.